Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari, and with me, as always, boxing junkie editor Michael Rosenthal. Thank you guys for joining us. I know we're all still buzzing from a great weekend of fights, particularly the SHOWTIME pay-per-view. What a performance by Gervonta Tank Davis. What a great card, period. I mean, I could continue to wax poetic, but we're going to break down the entire show a little bit later on. There were some other fights that weekend that I want to briefly touch on. Some pound-for-pounders in action. The return of unified world bantamweight champion Naoya Inoue. Is it Inoue or Inoue?
I think it's Inoue.
Okay, Inoue. So I'm going to rock with that from now on. Now, Inoue took on Jason Maloney, and, Maloney was overmatched, and it showed. Inoue had his way with him, broke him down, stopped him in 7. But it wasn't, just that Maloney was overmatched. Really, that fight was about how brilliant how brilliant Inoue looked. It was just an excellent performance from one of the world's best. Mike, what were your thoughts on how he looked?
I think Inoue is brilliant. I think you can argue he's the best fighter in the world. What can't he do? From what I could see, I think his physical tools are just completely off the charts. The speed, the power, and he's such a good boxer, always in the right position, so sharp, so accurate with his punches. I think it was Tim Bradley. I'm not sure. I think it was Tim Bradley who said he doesn't move his head enough. Okay, so he still has room to grow, which is it's actually a little bit scary if you think about it. So this guy is the complete package. Jason Maloney is a good fighter, and he was just completely lost on Saturday. Inoue, to me, is a combination of Lomachenko and Pacquiao, sort of a boxing wizard, but with a ton of dynamism. I believe he can become popular here in the U.S. because it's just so obvious how good he is, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because he doesn't speak English, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think he's got a lot working against him, in terms of not speaking English, being not just a really, really small fighter in terms of weight classes that typically haven't,
that's true,
crossed over. But, who knows? I mean, as he moves up in weight and so forth, if he can go up that high. But certainly the skills are there. And for the hardcore fans, hey, I mean, we're enjoying a great fighter. Now, another top fighter was in the ring over the weekend. Alexander Usyk, the former undisputed cruiserweight champ, who's now campaigning at heavyweight. He won a 12-round unanimous decision over Derek Chisora. Not quite the performance he hoped to put on, Mike, but at least he got the win.
Yeah, I'm a little bit puzzled by the reaction to that fight. I guess he was criticized in some circles for, maybe not dominating as much as people might have thought. I don't know. To me, he withstood an early onslaught from a much, much bigger fighter. He took everything that landed, and he settled in, into the fight, and he outboxed Chisora the rest of the way, which is how it's going to be with him against big heavyweights. At that level, the capable ones. Remember, this was only his second fight at heavyweight, and Chisora obviously was as fit and prepared as he's ever been. He was ready to go for that fight. It was so clear. Was it a great performance? No. But I'm not sure he'll ever have one of those against a big heavyweight. I think it was a good performance by Usyk. I would be pleased if I were part of Team Usyk. Just for the record, though, I want to add one thing. I still say he can't beat Fury or Joshua. I think he's just too small.
Or Wilder, for that matter. I can't see him beating any of or Andy Ruiz. I can't see him beating any of the top heavyweights. I mean, I guess what it is, I think the issue with the performance, look, how many losses did Chisora had coming in? Like 9 or 10 or something like that. He was well past his prime coming into this fight. And even in his prime, he was a fringe contender, at best. So I think that's why folks felt like, well, Usyk didn't perform the way we expected him to. But you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, he outboxed the guy and won, and that's how he's going to win at heavyweight. Yeah. I think he's a poor man's, Chris Bird at the weight, though. I just can't see him beating the top heavyweights.
Better than Chris Bird. Yeah.
I don't think so. Not at heavyweight.
I think because he's naturally bigger than Chris Bird, so I think he had that advantage.
But Chris Bird pretty much jumped into heavyweight as a pro. I mean, he might have been one way in the amateurs, but keep in mind, Usyk in the amateurs was fighting Sean Porter, so he was pretty small in the amateurs.
That's an interesting comparison. I'm going to give that more thought.
I think he's a poor man's. I don't think he's as good as Chris Bird was at heavyweight. Chris Bird was a pretty good heavyweight.
Well, Usyk's a pretty good heavyweight too. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
He hasn't faced one yet. I don't like giving that title. He hasn't faced one yet. And the guy he fought Saturday night, I mean, that guy's not a very good heavyweight, and now he's well past his prime. And so I think that might have been part of the reason. Like he's slower at heavyweight is what I noticed. He's not overly powerful. I could see someone like Wilder doing what he did to. Something subtle he did to Luis Ortiz throughout the first fight.
I mean,
the second fight.
One punch.
Because not even the one punch. What he did was he beat up on Ortiz's arms a lot throughout those fights, and he just he'd land hooks and little jabs to Ortiz's shoulder. Just slowly wore his arms down. I could see Usyk having serious trouble against the bigger guys in the division and even the contenders, But I wouldn't mind seeing him against Dillian White or Alexander Povetkin. I think he has a chance to beat them.
I think he's gonna surprise you.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see. Yeah. Now, speaking of heavyweights, let's move on to the next portion of the show, the PBC Fight of the Week. This Saturday, November 7th, Fox PBC Fight Night returns with a heavyweight triple header. And in the main event, Luis King Kong Ortiz takes on Alexander Flores in a 10-round contest. The action begins at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox, and we'll begin here with the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Ortiz is 31-2 with 26 knockouts. Flores 18-2-1, 16 KOs. Ortiz is 3-2 in his last fight with 2 knockouts. The 2 losses, obviously, were against Deontay Wilder. Flores 4-1 with 4 knockouts. He's got some pop. His loss was a knockout loss to Joseph Parker. Ortiz's last fight was that Wilder knockout in November. Flores last fought same month. He stopped a guy named Mario Heredia. Ortiz 74% knockout ratio. Flores 76. Ortiz, a lot more experienced, 161 rounds, Flores 69. Ortiz, 41 years old, Flores 30. Ortiz is a southpaw. Flores fights from an orthodox stance. They're both 6'4". Both have 78-inch reach, so same dimensions. Ortiz was born in Cuba, but he's lived in Miami for quite a long time now. Flores from Rowland Heights, California, which is in the Los Angeles area. They both turned pro in 2010.
Now, Mike, first things first, the question that's on every fight fan's mind: who is Alexander Flores?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not even sure I heard his name before this fight came up, which might be a bad thing because he has fought in a couple of big fights. Yeah. I just went over some videos. He seems like a capable guy. He has the basic skills. He moves pretty well for a guy that size. Good puncher, from what I've seen against second tier guys. He's had success at what you'd call the club level. The problem is that he failed the 2 times he stepped up in opposition. Yeah. He got knocked out early by Charles Martin and then Joseph Parker. This is a big opportunity for him, and he's obviously fired up. I was just on a conference call with him. He says he's learned a lot from the setbacks. Excuse me. He just has to prove that he can compete at this level. So far, he hasn't done that.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we don't know what we're going to get in Luis Ortiz either, and I think that's going to tell the tale of the night. I mean, he hasn't fought in nearly a year, and in that fight, we saw what happened. I mean, he suffered a brutal one-punch knockout loss to Deontay Wilder. Can Ortiz bounce back from that KO defeat?
I think he can, although the clock is ticking. He's 41 now. That's not ancient for a heavyweight these days, but I think he's looking at the last stage of his career. I saw enough in the rematch with Wilder to think that Ortiz, assuming he's fit and focused, and I think he will be, I think he'd still do some damage at a high level. He's still a very good boxer. We saw that. The power doesn't go away. He just can't take Wilder's power shots is kind of what it came down to. Nobody can. So there's really no shame in that. I think he can still give almost all heavyweights some problems, although we'll have to see what happens when he gets tagged by another big puncher, I guess. I doubt Flores is that guy, but who knows?
Right, exactly. I mean, I was very concerned after that shot that he got hit with Deontay. I was thinking to myself, well, maybe he's not going to be able to take a punch as well as he used to, after getting hit with that. Because those kind of punches, man, I mean, it was rough. But, that's what makes Saturday night's fight so intriguing. I mean, we get to see what Ortiz has left. And if he shake it at all, then, Flores is going to surprise. So with that, it's time to make our predictions. Mike, who do you got?
I think Ortiz is going to look a lot like the Ortiz, against anybody but Deontay Wilder. I think he's going to stop Flores in 7 rounds.
Yeah, well, you know what? Let me spice in things up a little bit here and agree with you. I'm going with Luis Ortiz by mid-round TKO. I think he lands his big left at some point and puts Flores away. Now, there's some other good heavyweights on the card. One of your favorite prospects, Mike, undefeated Frank Sanchez, is back in action versus Brian Howard. Looking forward to Sanchez, who's now trained by Eddie Reynoso. The card is also going to kick off with unbeaten heavyweight Michael Coffey from Brooklyn taking on veteran Joey Abel. Now, this isn't the only PBC card this week. Wednesday, November 4th, FS1 PBC Fight Night is back. And we've got a really good one in the main event, 10-round welterweight action. Montes Stanionis takes on Stanionis-DeLoach. Card begins at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Mike, we had DeLoach on our podcast some time back. He seems reborn at welterweight. Said he felt different moving down from 154. Then he went out and delivered a first-round KO. And of course, Stanionis, the big amateur standout who's been moved pretty quickly as a pro, undefeated, and now taking a big step up in his 11th fight. Mike, how do you see this one playing out?
I really like Stanionis. He's got that Olympic pedigree. His skills are really refined. He's trained by Ronnie Shields, so he's in really good hands now. He's got a great jab. He's real explosive, meaning all of his punches seem to have some pop. I love the way he really likes to go to the body. Love that. And he's always mindful of his defense. If you notice, his guard is always up. So he's just like a sharp boxer. Yeah. And, plus, explosive. So that's a nice combination. Real good prospect. And as you said, DeLoach is no slouch. He's lost some big fights, including a decision against Jason Rosario, but he's generally been competitive. He hasn't really been blown out. I think he got knocked out early in one of his losses, but generally he's been competitive. And he's coming off that good win over Levan Navarro, who I believe was undefeated going into that fight. So, he's coming off a good win. He's feeling good at 147. He's got dimensions that could cause problems. He's tall. He's rangy. I think this is a really nice matchup. We'll see how Stanionis copes with that.
So who are you picking?
I'm going to go with the guy with the pedigree, Stanionis, unanimous decision, but I think it's going to be a competitive fight.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's what I love DeLoach moving down in weight. I think he looks better at welterweight, but I've, been watching Stanionis for a long time. He really caught my eye about 2-3 years ago. It's a good thing about arriving to fights at like 5 p.m., 6 p.m., or in your case, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. You get to see those earlier fights. I remember watching him, I think in his second or third pro fight, and I'm like, who is this kid? He had flashes of something special. Now, he hasn't been able to put it together completely yet, and I don't know if he will because he has a penchant for fighting fire with fire, and he likes to fight. He likes to get in there. But I'm with you. I like him to win a close, competitive decision in this one. Now, as a reminder, I remain in first place. I know I'm going to get tired of saying that, but I remain in first place with the record of 25-5-1. Mike is 24-6-1. So we got 2 picks this week, although it doesn't look like the standings will change. Now, we're going to take a quick break and be right back.
The heavyweights are on Fox.
Luis Ortiz is back.
Luis King Kong Ortiz.
A force to be reckoned with. This guy's a freaking nature.
Takes on Alexander Flores. Ortiz, Flores, Saturday at 8 Eastern on Fox and the Fox Sports app.
All right, we are back, and it's time for the week in review. Now, last Saturday in the headlining event on Showtime pay-per-view, we've all seen it. We witnessed the birth of a star. Unbeaten 3-time world champion Gervonta Tank Davis against 4-division world champion Leo Santa Cruz. And man, did this fight deliver. It was great back and forth action, tense, just everything you wanted in a battle between two elite fighters. And then in one punch, Tank Davis delivered everything he could have hoped for. Knocked out Santa Cruz in the 6th round, establishing himself as a box office king in the 100 and 135 pound divisions. I mean, the knockout clip has gone viral. Tens of millions of people have seen it. Every single version of the clip that I see on a major outlet has got 3 million views, 4 million views, 1 million views. I mean, Mike, was this the KO of the year?
Well, first I'll describe it in 4 words: spectacular. It certainly is a prime candidate for knockout of the year. To stop a guy who's never been knocked out that way on that kind of stage is something that you're never going to forget. If you saw that, you'll never forget it. Yeah. And I think the fact that the fight itself was so intense, I think that made the knockout all the more dramatic. It's just like we were so amped, anyway, because the fight was so amazing. And then that knockout just took us all over the edge. You're watching it going, oh, and all of a sudden, wham, and you're like, oh man, there it is, and he's out. You know what? I just watched it again like 10 minutes ago.
Oh, really?
I just watched it again. You know what? I think pound for pound, that might be the most brutal uppercut I've ever seen. Watch it again and just keep watching. I watched it like 5 times. Just keep looking at that uppercut. It was so perfect, so brutal. There was no way that he could have knocked out a heavyweight with that punch.
Right.
I mean, that was just a crazy punch. I'm glad that Leo's okay. Now, the only thing that's holding me back a little bit, saying it's like the top knockout of all time, is that I expected it. I really thought that that's exactly what was going to happen at some point in the fight. But still, no doubt about it. It was an absolutely classic knockout. Yeah,
it's just one of those things where you could see a knockout, you could predict the stoppage, and a lot of people did, obviously, but not that. That was just insane.
It's crazy. Yeah, it was crazy.
The magnitude of the fight, and then you add the quality of the opponent, and of course the punch itself. I think it is the knockout of the year, and there's going to be some boxing hipster that's gonna nominate some fight that we've never seen before, but or that no one's ever seen. But I think this, in my opinion, is the clear winner of the award as for now. I mean, the year is not over. But Mike, what about Leo Santa Cruz? I mean, this was a tough loss for him. I'm glad to see that he's doing okay, but can he bounce back?
Well, first I just read actually a little while ago that he actually said he's considering retirement. I think that's maybe a normal reaction to something like this. Yeah. When you suffer a loss that brutal, you want to kind of just take a step back and analyze stuff. But he'll come back. There's no way in the world. The guy's a warrior. So absolutely, I think he's gonna bounce back. I think from a physical standpoint, I'm sure he'll be fine. He looks fine, sounds fine. Doctors say he's fine. So I don't think that's an issue. And from an emotional standpoint, listen, I think Leo knew the risk he was taking. I'm sure he's disappointed. He's expressed his disappointment, especially getting stopped the way he got stopped. At the same time, I'm also positive that he's telling himself, listen, I gave it a shot. That's what champions do. I dared to be great, cliche. I'm sure he'll stay at 130 and do some damage there against guys who aren't named Tank. There are plenty of big name guys at that weight, so that's not an issue.
Yeah, I think he should go on, and I think he can bounce back. You nailed it. I mean, in this fight, he showed how good he is. That punch, which you also alluded to, that would have definitely knocked out any 130 pounder, any 135 pounder, which that's why I had an issue with the argument that, well, Leo might be too small going in. I didn't think Tank was physical. He was just really powerful in a way that it really didn't matter what size you were. And so I think to that end, Santa Cruz silenced a lot of critics with his performance prior to that. But look, well, first, if Leo doesn't throw 3 right hands in a row, maybe he doesn't get hit with that punch. Maybe Tank doesn't time that uppercut, and we head into the 7th round with Santa Cruz up on some scorecards, So no doubt in my mind, he can beat a lot of guys at 130 pounds, and that's where he should remain. Now, let's get back to Tank Davis. First man to stop Leo Santa Cruz. He was also the only fighter to stop Jose Pedraza, who isn't an elite fighter, but he's a good fighter. Tank did perform far better against Pedraza than Vasily Lomachenko, and now Pedraza's campaigning at 140 pounds. How good is Gervonta Tank Davis?
He's really good. I've said on the podcast at least once that he has the potential to be number one pound for pound, and this sort of just underscored that. I think this performance.
Yeah.
I think we got our first real clear glimpse of that on Saturday.
Yeah.
And it's not just power, which is his obvious strength. He's the speed. That punch. One of the things about that punch is how fast it came and how fast it was.
Yeah.
I went back. One of the reasons I went back to watch it multiple times was I'm like, did they speed up the video somehow? I mean, that's what it looked like to me. It's like they speeded it up. I'm like, no, that's how fast it was.
Mm-hmm.
He's an athletic guy. I love the way he sets up shots. You just talked about the way that he set up the uppercut. He's patient. He's intelligent. Really accurate. You know that he landed. I think I got these numbers right. He landed 54.8% of his power shots on Saturday.
Wow.
That's just an insane number for power shots.
Wow.
I like the way he took Santa Cruz's punches. I don't think Leo's a big puncher anyway, but I like the way he took his punches. And not only did he take them, but they seemed to kind of piss him off, which I liked also. I just think he's the complete package. I don't even know who to compare him to. Maybe he's a little Mike Tyson in terms of explosiveness and the power. Although I think Tank's more methodical than Tyson was. He doesn't bob and weave and bounce the way Tyson did in his prime. Anyway, the bottom line is, as I wrote in my column for Boxing Junkie, this is special stuff, folks.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. A lot of stuff stood out to me watching the fight. And funny enough, I saw a little Floyd in there. I know, Floyd's not known for one-punch knockouts, but one thing that
I did
really
too.
Did you?
Yep.
Well, one thing that stood out to me was, Floyd always says it's different at this level. We all don't perform the same, under the brightest lights, and I kept my composure. These Floydisms that he always says, along with, like I said before. But I was really impressed at how poised and composed Tank was, and how he just sort of took his time, and you could see, he was just making the adjustments in there, computing stuff, and then he started digging to Santa Cruz's body. I think he actually hurt Santa Cruz before that punch. I think he hurt him with a couple right hooks, and then when he had Santa Cruz along the ropes, the way he set up that punch, he threw that punch from an orthodox stance. If you watch the replay, he switched to orthodox to throw that uppercut. I mean, it was just masterful. And I thought, holy crap, this, what Tank has been saying about this guy, what Mayweather's been saying about this guy is true, that he has all these skills and so forth. I think he has a strong case for pound for pound list. I mean, he was brilliant against the borderline Hall of Famer. And the composure he showed was, something I see from the greats. And he showed that against Pedraza as well. So it looks like Tank Davis shines when the lights are the brightest. He's special, like you said. Now, with that said, what's next for him? Which opponents would you like to see him face?
Well, I have to say, I cannot wait to see how he does against the top 135 pounders. I think that's going to be a truly big test for him, fighting a guy like Teofimo Lopez or a guy like, I don't know how good Ryan Garcia is, but I'd love to see that fight. And anyway, let's take first things first, though. I mean, he could stay at 130 for another fight.
That's what he said he's going to do.
Right. So he could, I mean, who knows? I think, didn't he also say that he'd like to fight the winner of Campbell and Garcia?
He said that he would stay at 130, but for a big fight at 135, he would move for a big fight at 135.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Got it. So, I mean, I think he was obviously in shape, really good shape for that fight. He made weight, seemed like no problem. I think he's ridiculously strong at 130. Yeah. And he proved he could make 130. Maybe he defends his title against Chris Colbert, who's ranked number 1. I mean, a guy like that. And I can come up with half a dozen other junior lightweights who would make for a good fight. Burchell, Diaz, Herring, Frampton, Stevenson, Valdez, Xavier Martinez. I could just go on and on, just naming all these top guys. It's a good division. But you know what? I think that the fascinating fights are at 135. Who are you thinking of? Well, I mean, Tank and Teofimo Lopez, which, in my opinion, would just be an absolutely enormous fight. It's a great matchup from a fan standpoint. I think from a business standpoint, it's a big fight. I would love to see that. I mean, can you imagine that fight? How about, from the number of followers that these guys have, Tank and Ryan Garcia? It's a huge fight. Huge fight. These are some of the biggest fights in boxing.
Yeah.
or Devin Haney. I don't think that one's quite as big, but it's almost as big. I mean, that's another great fight.
Yeah.
If he's going to end up, Tank's going to end up being a superstar, on top of the pound for pound list. I think these are the guys he's going to have to beat to get there. I imagine he'd have a lot of success at 135, but there are no guarantees. These are good fighters we're talking about. One question I would have is what happens to his power when he moves up, like full-fledged 135 pounder. I think his power, he will take it with him, but you never know. Anyway, it's just absolutely fascinating with him now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, well, look, he said he plans to stay at 130. And so I'm just going to go based off of that. And all those fights at 135, if he has the opportunity, I believe that he will take those fights, and those are huge fights. But assuming he does stay at 130, like you said, and he said all the right things in a post-fight presser, said he's going to take a week and a half off, and then he's going to hop right back into the gym. He wants to, relocate to Vegas, really liked what he saw there. I actually noticed on his Instagram story the other night, last night, I think, actually, he was watching Mayweather Castillo too. So he's, I think he turned a corner. Leonard Ellaby was telling us last week, and he's found that focus. If he does stay at 130, I want to see him fight Gary Russell Jr. Two guys from the DMV area. Russell's from Maryland. Tank is from Baltimore. I think it would be huge locally, a great match of skills. I hope we see it in 2021. I don't know if that happens or not, but it was just something that came to mind, especially since I heard Gary Russell calling him out immediately afterward. Now, in the chief support on the card, WBA World Super Lightweight Champion Mario Barrios remained undefeated, stopping a game Ryan Carl in the 6 rounds. This was another great fight for as long as it lasted. By the way, all 4 fights on the televised card ended in a KO, which is rare. Mike, what were your thoughts on how Barrios fared?
I thought he looked sharp, especially compared to his previous fight against Batyer Akhmedov.
Right.
I thought he fought a smart fight. He was patient, methodically picking Carl apart and ultimately stopping him. I think Carl was there to be hit. He's a really aggressive, almost a little wild kind of guy. Maybe not the best defensive fighter, but Barrios did what he was supposed to do. It was a good night's work for him.
Yeah, definitely. I thought he looked great. He's a big 140 pounder, and he hits hard. He goes to the body well, and he's got a great corner with Virgil Hunter. I think he's ready for the next step, or at least ready to test himself against the next level. Who would you like to see him face?
Well, he said that he wants to fight Prograis. Barrios is a secondary title holder behind Josh Taylor. So I think it's time for him to fight these kind of guys. I personally think Barrios could use a little bit more work. Maybe one more lower level or mid-level contender would make more sense than a guy like Prograis. But I get why he wants Prograis. He wants big fights. He wants to test himself. If he doesn't get Prograis, maybe if you want to stay in-house, especially maybe a guy like Rancis Barthélemy would be a good opponent. Somebody at that level, I mean. Barthélemy's ranked just below Barrios. So maybe somebody like that.
Yeah, I like that idea. The person that I've heard mentioned and who he said he wants, Regis Prograis, it's a great fight. I mean, both guys from Texas, both are heavy hitters. But is that too much too soon in your opinion?
Yeah, I especially Prograis looked really good in the short time he was in the ring. I think Prograis right now at this moment's at a different level. But who knows? I mean, that's when we would learn more about Barrios. He's in there with a guy like that, and if he passes that test, then he's on his way. I just think that's a tough test. Yeah,
it certainly is. And you just mentioned Prograis fought right before Barrios. He failed to make the 140-pound limit versus Juan Heraldez. He was 1.5 pounds over, but he made us forget about that by reminding us of how good he is. He bombed Heraldez out in 3 rounds. Mike, how do you think Prograis looked?
Yeah, I forgot how good Prograis was.
Yeah.
And he just overwhelmed Heraldez, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think he's one of the best in the business. I really do. Had he beaten Taylor, and I guess you could argue that he did. I mean, it was that close. He might be a pound for pound guy. Fast, explosive, powerful, skillful. He's got everything. I think he's right there with Taylor and Jose Ramirez. It might turn out to be the best of the bunch. He still might turn out to be the best of the bunch. I thought he had a bad night against Taylor, and he still made it a close fight. I'm sure he learned a lot in that fight that he's going to use going forward, and I just believe he's ready for anybody.
Yeah, it seemed like it. I mean, he looked as good as ever, and the power is definitely for real. Speaking of power, in the televised opener, Cruz set the tone for the entire night, knocking out Diego Magdaleno in one round. Cruz is, he's one hell of a lightweight. Mike, the fight obviously didn't last long, but can you assess his performance for us?
Yeah, I just watching that, and I'm just like, holy crap!
Right.
That reminded me. That reminded me of a James Kirkland fight where he just like goes nuts from the opening bell, trying to decapitate his opponent. Only Cruz is better and probably much better than James Kirkland. That was just crazy. He never even gave Magdaleno a chance to get started at all. Right. You'd think a veteran like Magdaleno could figure out a way to survive that kind of onslaught. He just couldn't. I'm not sure if I was impressed or just blown away by the viciousness of that attack. I really don't know where Cruz might fit in among the top lightweights, but he sure got my attention.
Yeah, he certainly did. And I'm trying to figure out who would be an ideal opponent for Cruz's next fight coming off this big win.
Well, I'm not thinking about like affiliations, maybe more timing here. George Kambosos, who just beat Lee Selby in a big fight overseas, is ranked higher than him, higher than Cruz by the same sanctioning body. Kambosos is a real aggressive guy. Him and Cruz would make just an insane fight. And I know Kambosos wants a big fight, and he's calling out even bigger, big name guys. How about Robert Easter?
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think Cruz earned a fight like that, but based on what we saw, and it'd be really fun to see that fight. Argenis Mendes, Ivan Redcatch are also guys that I thought of. I don't really care who Cruz fights next. I just want to see if he could do that again.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about Richard Comey or Javier Fortuna. So I think we're on the same. We're on the same wavelength as in terms of the kind of fighter he should face next and the level of fighter that he should face next. Because those are all great fights. I mean, just explosive fights. And if he's able to come out of that, then he's earned a shot at some of the bigger names in the division. All right. Let's take another quick break. And when we come back, Mike and I are going to go toe to toe.
The heavyweights are on Fox.
Luis Ortiz is back.
Luis King Kong Ortiz.
A force to be reckoned with. This guy's a freaking nature.
Takes on Alexander Flores. Ortiz, Flores, Saturday at 8 Eastern on Fox and the Fox Sports app.
All right, it's time for Toe to Toe. Every week on this segment, Mike and I go back and forth over a topic or two, and today it's going to be two topics. The first, Saturday's knockout extravaganza on Showtime pay-per-view has spawned us to create our own knockout list, so to speak. We're going to list our three biggest punchers in the sport. We're going to do so in ascending order. So, Mike, let's start with your number three biggest puncher in boxing.
Okay, I was almost wishy-washy here. I almost picked a tie between two guys. I was going back and forth between Naoya Inoue and Artur Beterbiev. I decided on Beterbiev. He has the 100% knockout ratio, which obviously catches your attention. He's knocked out every guy he's faced. Beyond that, though, there's something really heavy, really punishing about his punches. And I wanted to mention something that Gervonta Davis told me a few days before the fight. I actually had the opportunity to speak to Gervonta, and I asked him where the power comes from. And at first he said, I have no idea. And then he kind of paused, and then a split second later he said, you know where it came from? He said it comes from accuracy. Accuracy, hitting the bullseye. So maybe it goes back to what Davis said when we're talking about Beterbiev. Beterbiev has the natural power, but he also knows how to deliver it. I think he's a better boxer than people realize. So he knows how and when to throw these shots, and he's got the ability to land it.
Yeah, I think he proved his boxing skills against Alexander Govsnik, and his power is no doubt undeniable. He came to mind for my number three as well. So did Jermell Charlo. So I kind of struggled with this one, but in the end, I went with Naoya Inoue. The man has done it through multiple divisions, and that's what kind of pushed it over the top for me. He's dangerous to the head and body. We saw that power last weekend against Jason Maloney. So, he's my number three pick, but a couple guys in the running there. Let's go to number two. I'll start my number two off, and it is Gervonta Tank Davis. Strong case for number one here. I mean, the guy's 24-0, 23 knockouts, first man to stop Leo Santa Cruz. Leo's too small, they say. Well, he was the only one to stop Jose Pedraza, who's now fighting two divisions above. He knocked out Pedraza with a right hook. He knocked Santa Cruz out with a left uppercut. I mean, the kid is just special. He could be number one on this list, sooner rather than later. Clearly one of the hardest hitters in the sport, one of the most exciting fighters in the sport, and he's number 2 and soaring toward number 1.
My number 2?
Yes, sir.
Gervonta Davis. Just it goes back to what I said about Beterbiev. Look at that punch. Obviously he's got the natural strength and natural power. That's something that you're just born with. But that punch was just perfectly timed, perfectly placed. And you got to know what you're doing to do that. So you combine those two things and you're just a wrecking machine. His punches just come at you so hard and so fast.
Yeah.
I can imagine him finishing his career with a knockout percentage over 90%, which is very, very rare.
Yeah, and I could see him knocking out, making all of his title defenses at 130 probably ends in a knockout. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. He's so strong at that weight.
I agree.
It's scary, just super scary. One of the hardest hitters ever at 130, I feel like. So I can't wait to see what the future holds. And it is time for our number 1 picks. I think I have a feeling who yours is, but let the world know who's your biggest puncher in boxing.
I still think it's Deontay Wilder. Just the finality of his knockouts just really stand out to me. His right is like a heat-seeking missile, and it generally just obliterates the target. I'm thinking of the 2 fights that preceded the rematch with Fury, his one-punch knockouts of Brazil and Ortiz. Those are just crazy knockouts, just utter destruction. Those punches are just like, they're like gunshots. I don't know if that's the appropriate analogy, but that's the way it feels. And it's just like boom, and it's over.
Yeah, when he knocked out Dominic Brazil at the Barclays, I mean, I thought something had gone off in the arena. I think I almost jumped out of my seat. And so for that reason, Deontay Wilder is definitely the biggest puncher in boxing. He is on my list. I mean, the man, first of all, he's flattening guys who outweigh him by 20, 30 pounds, True. Which I think says something. I mean, the power is incredible. It's really not up for debate, in my opinion. And despite his loss to Tyson Fury last February, I believe if Deontay lines up any heavyweight, for that, Fury or anyone else for that matter, lines them up, they're going to sleep if he touches them in the right place. I do think, I've been thinking about what you said regarding Tank's response to you about accuracy. That plays a huge part. And I feel like Deontay, when he lines up for that right hand, he lands it perfect, man. I mean, he finds that sweet spot and you are finished. So that plays a huge part in why he's such a great puncher, his accuracy, his ring IQ, and of course, just his natural power. So he is my number 1. Now, real quick before we go on to the next topic, I just thought of something I want to say. It's kind of funny.
I'll bet you that there's a chance that Wilder could make 200 pounds. Can you imagine how hard?
He's mentioned that before.
Can you imagine how hard he would punch as a cruiserweight?
That wouldn't be fair.
Can you imagine him fighting guys who weigh in the high 190s? That would be insane. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be fair. I mean, he'd be like a charged up Bob Foster, in that weight class. It's ridiculous when you think about it. But he's mentioned fighting at cruiserweight before. I mean, this guy's one of the hardest hitting heavyweights of all time. So I think a commission would have to step in.
No, this isn't fair.
Going down to cruiserweight. Now, our next topic is a little tougher. We're going to list our 3 PBC fights we want to see in 2021. And we're going to do this in ascending order as well. So, Mike, the floor is yours. What's the third best fight? Is that how you put it? The third fight you'd most want to see in 2021.
There you go. I went with 2 conventional choices or more conventional choices, and one that I thought was thinking out of the box a little bit. My number 3 is thinking out of the box a little bit. It's Errol Spence Jr. versus Jermell Charlo.
Whoa.
Spence has been calling out Canelo Alvarez at 160. So a fight with Charlo 154, I think, is perfectly reasonable. How big would that fight be, assuming Spence gets past Danny Garcia? Spence and Charlo are 2 of the hottest fighters in the world right now, meaning it would generate a lot of interest. Spence is probably a better boxer, but Charlo's size and power is the absolute equalizer. That fight would be just crazy fun.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'd ever get to see it because I don't know if Derek James would ever allow it. But I've thought about that fight a lot. I mean, because it's such a natural, great style matchup, and I've always wondered, like, well, if Errol moves up to 154, who else is he gonna fight, right? I mean, it has to be Gervonta Charlo, and that'd be incredible. That would be so huge. That would set the boxing world on fire. Who would you pick in that fight, though?
You know what? I'm going with my gut here, which I usually stay with once I do it. I think Charlo. I think because he's a good enough boxer and because of the size, I think I would pick him. But it's a really tough fight for both guys. I mean, Spence might just outbox him. He might be that much better. I don't know. But to move up in weight to fight a guy like Gervonta Charlo right now, that's a tough assignment.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. You know, but if there's anyone that could do it, it's Errol Spence Jr.
Exactly.
You know, and I could see him boxing his way to a decision and just staying on the outside. But that's a tough one. Now, my number 3 is a super bantamweight fight that we could see happen. I've seen both these guys call them out, and I just think it's a fun fight. I just want to see it because I think it'd be just exciting. It'd be a slugfest, and that is Luis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa. Now, keep in mind that both of them do hold titles, so it would be a unification as well. I like I said, I see both guys calling each other out on social media. But man, Nery didn't look as otherworldly as he's done in other fights. In his first fight at 122 pounds, first official fight at 122 pounds. Whereas Figueroa is so big for the weight. Got a great chin. He just grinds you down. Excellent body puncher. I just would love to see, what would happen between the two of them. If Nery can back Figueroa up, if he can hurt him, what happens if he can't, or what happens if he gets hurt? It's just a great style matchup, and I'd love to see it.
I like that fight. I hadn't thought about that. I think Figueroa is pound for pound one of the toughest guys in boxing.
Yeah.
Really tough guy. So I'm not sure that Nery could hurt him. Now, Nery didn't look good in his last fight, or at least not as good as I expected him to. But I suppose he'd be hungry to correct that in his next fight. So that could be a wild fight.
Yeah, it would be. It'd be insane. I think a fight of the year candidate. So bring it on. Make it happen, guys. Now, I'll start with my number 2, welterweight fight that I saw both guys mention on social media a few weeks ago, sort of go back and forth, a little bit trash talk, and I thought, man, I'd love to see that fight. Keith Thurman versus Yordenis Ugas. Now, Thurman obviously looking for an opponent for his comeback. He wants Spence. I know him and Spence have been trash talking each other. Maybe that happens. Maybe that doesn't. Maybe a rematch with Sean Porter. Danny Garcia is still there. But one matchup that I just haven't heard him mention for him is Yordenis Ugas until they mentioned it a couple weeks ago. I love the fight for Ugas as well. A big matchup at 147, a chance for him to prove himself. He's a great boxer. He's a huge welterweight. And we know Keith Thurman, and we know what his credentials are. I think it would make for an incredible fight in the ring. Yeah,
I agree. Plus, I think Ugas has earned it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good comeback fight for Thurman after the Pacquiao loss. Thurman's had a lot of time to heal whatever has been ailing him. He should be pretty healthy. I'm really curious to see what he's going to look like in his next fight. That's a tough assignment for your comeback fight, though. I mean, Ugas is a rough guy. He's not a huge puncher, but he's a rough guy, and he's got a lot of skill. That's a really interesting fight.
Yeah, it's a great fight. I would love to see it. And who do you have for your number 2?
See, number 2, like you said, this was a little bit harder. 1 and 2 were actually pretty easy for me. 2 is David Benavidez and Caleb Plant.
Okay.
It's rare when you have 2 unbeaten, compelling young champions, which these guys are, who happen to fight under the same umbrella, in position to unify titles the way these guys are right now. I think it's a 50-50 fight, which is always a good thing. It should be fan-friendly, which is always a good thing. And I think it's an interesting style matchup. Benavidez walks you down while Plant is more of a technician. Who wins? I couldn't care less. I just want to see these guys fight.
Yeah, I love that fight. And geez, anyway, I'm not going to say anything because I'm not going to say anything. Let's move on to your number.
Well, I think you might have just hinted at it.
Thanks a lot. Let's move on to number 1, and I'm curious, who do you have there?
See, well, number 1 for me was easy. I mean, as soon as I knew that we needed to do this. I mean, this was the first fight that popped into my head. Manny Pacquiao and Mikey Garcia.
Okay.
Yeah, that's such a great matchup. Two undersized welterweights who will be in the Hall of Fame when their careers are over. It would just be super competitive. It could be a torch passing fight, or it could be Pacquiao pulling off another crazy win. Post 40 years old. Either way, the fans win. I would understand if Pacquiao chose to fight Conor McGregor for obvious reasons, but just as obviously, I'd much rather see this fight. I mean, to me, this is one of the ultimate matchups in boxing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it makes so much sense. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, but a great fight for both guys. And I honestly don't know who would win that fight. I can see a path to victory for both fighters. So close to 50-50. I love Mikey. I love Manny. And I'd love to see that fight in 2021 if it happens too. Now, my number one, obviously, is Caleb Plant. Versus David Benavidez.
I stole your thunder.
You sure did, man. I'm out here, trying to explain why this is such a great fight. I spoke to David a couple weeks back about it, and just talking about the landscape at 168, and we mentioned Canelo and some other guys, and he said, "Man, I want Caleb Plant before any of them," and that's the kind of attitude he has. I know Caleb Plant feels the exact same way. I mean, two guys in their prime, it doesn't get much better, and the trash talking the build up to the fight is just going to be spectacular. So I can't wait to do it. I thought about Gary Russell versus Tank, but we already had that conversation, so I decided to leave it out. But either way, all great fights that we hope we see in 2021. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. As a reminder, please like and subscribe to the PBC Podcast wherever you find us, from YouTube to all the podcast platforms to the Premier Boxing Champions website. Also, two great PBC cards this week. First, Wednesday night, 8 Eastern time on FS1. We get a battle of up-and-coming welterweights in the headliner as Gervonta Stanionis takes on Stanionis-DeLoach. Then, Saturday night, beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox, a heavyweight triple header featuring Luis King Kong Ortiz versus Alexander Flores in the main event. So it should be some fun stuff. Be sure you tune into that. And for myself and for Mike, thanks for checking us out this week. And be sure to come back next week for more boxing talk right here on the PBC Podcast.